to Motor West. Jack, take my way, it's the highway, that's the best. Get your kicks on Route 66.
In 2000, Walt Disney Animation Studios released Dinosaur, their first ever full-length feature to primarily use computer-generated 3D animation. Directed by Eric Layton and Ralph Zondag, the movie takes place in prehistoric times and follows Aladar, an iguanodon raised by a family of lemurs. A meteor shower destroys their home and forces Aladar and his found family to seek refuge with a herd of dinosaurs. Together, they make their way through treacherous terrain on a journey to the nesting grounds. While the film grossed a whopping $348 million, the expensive production and marketing costs prevented the film from breaking even during its theatrical release. It also didn't receive great critical response, as most found the plot to be rather average and below Disney's storytelling standard at the time. Truly, the only praise Dinosaur got was for its animated visuals. Rotten Tomatoes sums up this sentiment nicely with this critic consensus. While Dinosaur's plot is generic and dull, its stunning computer animation and detailed backgrounds are enough to make it worth a look. To many, this is where the story of Dinosaur ends and begins. Disney attempted CGI animation, it wasn't a hit, but they've since recovered with well-received 3D animations like Frozen, Zootopia, and Encanto. In a 2020 article by Drew Taylor for Sci-Fi, he states, "Had Dinosaur been a truly meteoric phenomenon along the lines of Jurassic Park, it would have theoretically profoundly changed Disney and, potentially, the industry as a whole. Unfortunately, it came and went, and all we have left are the fossilized remains and Dinosaur." Overall, I agree with the general opinion on Dinosaur, that it's just a mediocre movie with nothing of great substance. And by today's CGI standards, the once praised visuals just aren't as stunning. I understand that a lot of people have nostalgia for this film, and I respect that. However, I didn't grow up with this movie. I just watched it for the first time this year. So, I lack all nostalgic care for this film that others have. Nonetheless, I don't think it's a terrible movie, nor Disney's worst, but it was undeniably a flop for the studio. What I strongly disagree with, however, is the idea that it didn't profoundly change Disney, and the industry as a whole. The movie may be a forgotten flop to many, but its impact is something none of us can avoid. In the intro to the film, the lemur Pilo narrates that sometimes the smallest
thing can make the biggest changes of all.
This line unintentionally predicted the legacy of this film, as this now small and unremembered movie has impacted CGI permanently, helped lead to the mass acquisition of companies by Disney, and changed the theme park game forever. Dinosaur might be a flop, but it is an immensely impactful one, and I'm here to tell you why. But in order to see how Dinosaur is affecting us now, we have to start at the beginning. In 1986, while working on the set of RoboCop, director Paul Verhoeven and visual effects producer Phil Tippett began discussing an idea for an animated dinosaur movie. After RoboCop wrapped, the pair made an appointment to pitch the project to the then chairman of the Walt Disney Studios, Jeffrey Katzenberg. The meeting went well, and the project was greenlit. Verhoeven and Tippett planned to use stop-motion as the main form of animation, but budgetary concerns were quickly raised, as the proposed stop-motion budget of $72 million was far above what Disney hoped it would cost. It was decided that the film could instead be accomplished at a lower cost by combining the stop-motion with animatronics and live-action photography. Animation costs could also be cut by making the characters not speak, and instead have their internal dialogue be heard by the audience. This was fine by Tippett, as he didn't really want the dinosaurs to speak in the first place. But studio interference and budget cuts wouldn't always be in his favor. For example, Disney wanted the dinosaurs to look a lot more friendly, sing songs, and all the classic tropes that would make the 90s era of Disney animation so successful. Regardless of whether or not it would make the film a hit, it wasn't Tippett's vision of the project. He hoped for Dinosaur to be a sprawling and serious epic about evolution and the extinction of the dinosaurs. But that's not the way the project was headed. Producer Kathleen Kennedy saw Tippett's frustration and offered a solution. Steven Spielberg was working on an adaptation of Michael Crichton's novel, Jurassic Park. She knew Spielberg had shown interest in having Tippett work on the project and saw it as an offer he shouldn't refuse. While it would allow Tippett to do more serious dinosaur content, it would mean that he would have to leave his own dinosaur project behind. So, did Tippett take the offer? Well, yes. Yes, he did. Jurassic Park became easily the most well-known dinosaur movie ever made. It was the highest-grossing movie when it was released, and won Tippett a Best Visual Effects Oscar for his pioneering work. So, while the original vision for Tippett and Verhoeven's dinosaur was as extinct as the animal itself, through some Jurassic Park-like magic, it would soon be brought back to life. In 1990, ground broke on a fourth park at the Disney World Resort, with plans for it to be centered around animals. Imagineer Joe Rohde was tasked to lead the project. By 1993, Rohde had expanded the concept to involve more than just zoo animals, but also mythological creatures and extinct animals like dinosaurs. Then CEO Michael Eisner believed that making the previously cancelled Dinosaur movie would create a kind of reciprocal process between the studio and Imagineering. And with that, Dinosaur was back on the table. Or should I say, the very basic idea of making an animated movie about dinosaurs was back on the table. Essentially everything about Verhoeven and Tippett's original idea was changed. And changed again. And kept on changing throughout the production. For example, the dinosaurs now would be talking instead of having the audience hear their thoughts. The film wouldn't be serious and about extinction and evolution either. And in case we thought Verhoeven or Tippett would be coming back to direct, their positions had been passed on to new directors Ralph Zondek and Eric Layton. But the most important change of all was that Dinosaur would no longer be stop-motion animated. Rather, the filmmakers decided to combine live-action backgrounds with computer-generated character animation in the foreground. This would be Disney's first feature-length film to highly utilize CG animation, and as such, it required a lot of change for the studio. On April 17, 1996, Disney acquired the visual effects studio DreamQuest Images. The goal of this acquisition would be to build a digital studio that would support Imagineering, television, and film. This merged studio would be referred to as the Secret Lab. While there was a broad range of projects the Secret Lab could work on, the first and foremost reason for this merger was to create Dinosaur. As a result, the expectations for the film were massive, as it would have to be both financially and critically successful to justify and continue to fund the Secret Lab for other projects in the future. However, it wasn't just the Secret Lab depending on the success of Dinosaur, but rather Disney Animation as a whole. To understand why, we have to look at the leaders in the world of CG animated features at that time, Pixar. Just as Disney would funnel loads of money into the creation of their digital studio in 1996, Pixar was doing the same, just nearly a decade earlier than them. However, Pixar lacked one big thing that Disney had: money. While the products and technology that Pixar was creating were groundbreaking and award-winning, they were still losing millions of dollars every year. Pixar hoped to create a full-length feature film specifically about toys that came to life, a Toy Story, if you will. However, they knew it wouldn't be possible without a more steady partnership and source of funding. In 1991, Pixar signed a deal with the Walt Disney Company to do just that. This deal was not Disney acquiring and owning Pixar, but rather just a little promise for Pixar to produce a film and Disney to distribute it, with other nitty-gritty non-disclosed information in between. 4 years later, on November 22, 1995, Toy Story was released to the public. While it had its production hiccups and challenges, the film turned out to be undeniably successful, as it grossed $394 million at the box office and is one of the most well-known animated movies of our time. In spite of the film's success, the original deal left the majority of the profits in merchandising with Disney. So, if any of Pixar's future films were distributed under this same deal, and it flopped, Pixar would become too broke to survive. As a result, the best course of action was to turn Pixar from a production company into a full-on studio. Pixar soon filed for public offering, and they successfully raised around $132 million. With Pixar now as its own animation studio, a new deal was made with Disney, making them both 50-50 partners. The stakes were still nonetheless high for Pixar, as their second film needed to be as successful and well-received as Toy Story in order for them to be taken seriously and cemented as leaders in 3D animation. Which brings us all the way back around to Dinosaur, as the stakes were similar, but in a different way. To be 50-50 partners is fine, but to produce CG animated films internally would vastly increase revenue for Disney. The decision to make Dinosaur CG animated, while not solely to rival Pixar, was definitely inspired by Toy Story's success. If Dinosaur could get the same box office and critical success as Toy Story, it would make Disney a true force to be reckoned with when it came to animation. During the 90s, Disney was going through what is now commonly referred to as the Disney Renaissance, because of the high critical and commercial success of their films. From The Little Mermaid to Tarzan, and nearly all that falls in between, these films made Disney look like the masters of 2D animation. So, if they could master 3D animation as well, they'd become an unstoppable force of animation power. Knowing that Dinosaur had to succeed, Disney aimed to promote it in every way possible. And that mass marketing ties us back around to what revived the film in the first place: the theme parks. As mentioned before, Joe Rohde's plan for Disney World's animal-centric theme park, Animal Kingdom, was to have it focus on 3 groups of animals: real, extinct, and mythical. The real animals would be found on a massive safari tour, as well as other bits and places throughout the park. The animals, both mythical and extinct, would have their own unique lands. The dinosaur-themed land, very creatively called Dino Land, would feature a ride where guests could time travel back to the late Cretaceous period and see dinosaurs that would be featured in the film Dinosaur. Although that's about where the connections end, as no plotlines from the film were present in the ride, mainly because new directors Ralph Zondek and Eric Layton still hadn't settled on one. But I digress. The final land, themed to mythical animals, would be called Beastly Kingdom, and it was easily the most enticing and exciting land of all. And that's not just me hyping this land up. Based on guest surveys from the early stages of Animal Kingdom's design, Beastly Kingdom scored a higher interest level than all others. So, what made this land that interesting? Beastly Kingdom was separated into two distinct realms, good and evil, with a small sea creature lagoon in between. The good realm would feature two attractions, Fantasia Gardens and Quest of the Unicorn. Fantasia Gardens was a slow boat ride that would take guests through the many scenes of Fantasia, as the film is full of magical, goodly, and most importantly, mythical creatures. Quest of the Unicorn was a large hedge maze inhabited by many creatures that would lead guests to a shimmering castle, where within you could meet a stunning animatronic of a mystical unicorn. As for the evil realm, it would feature an old burnt castle that held the coaster Dragon Tower. This would be Animal Kingdom's only roller coaster, and Disney World's first inverted coaster, a ride where guests are suspended from the track above them. Dragon Tower would take guests through the chambers of the castle and feature an encounter with a 30-foot-high dragon animatronic. Unfortunately, in 1994, it became clear that aspects of the park had been underestimated in cost. The real animal elements were deemed as absolutely essential to Animal Kingdom, even though they would chew up a majority of the park's budget. So, room for only one more land remained. As cool as Beastly Kingdom sounds, the sheer topic matter of this video alone is likely a clear indicator as to which land was greenlit and which was pushed back to a hypothetical Phase 2 of Animal Kingdom expansion. However, this second phase never came, and Imagineers working on the Beastly Kingdom project were let go. Michael Eisner's deciding factor on creating Dinoland instead of Beastly Kingdom was yet again to create synergy between the film and the parks. Like was mentioned earlier, Dinosaur, the film, could not fail, and thus needed to be promoted in all ways possible. This, the cancellation of Beastly Kingdom for the promotion of Dinosaur, is one of the first massive impacts this film had. While it may seem small and irrelevant now, this tiny decision set up a domino effect that has deeply impacted the theme park world forever. But alas, all of these situations require a proper setup in history in order to be fully appreciated. So, I guess that means the next logical step is to talk about McDonald's.
Surprise! Guess who?
The Loch Ness Monster.
No.
The Six Musketeers.
No.
Oh, the McDonald's Chicken McNuggets Happy Meal with regular fries and soft drink.
How'd you know?
Just a lucky guess.
In the late 80s and early 90s, fast food restaurants across America truly focused in on advertising to a younger audience through the addition of both play areas within restaurants and toys within kids' meals. Naturally, it made sense for Disney, the kings of catering to young audiences, to partner with these restaurant chains in their endeavors. One of the first cross-promotions between Mickey D's and Mickey Mouse was Splash for Cash. This was a simple game created to promote Disney's upcoming log flume ride, Splash Mountain, a ride that I definitely haven't talked about before. The game was simple. Customers could purchase a drink at a participating McDonald's location, peel off the sticker on the cup, and reveal prizes like cash, discounted food, or tickets to Disneyland. At one point, McDonald's was even considered to sponsor the attraction itself, as can be seen in this concept art. While McDonald's didn't end up sponsoring the ride, the Splash for Cash promotion nonetheless created a large amount of hype for the attraction's opening. Things were going well for McDonald's and Disney. However, a few years later, after a Happy Meal promotional tie-in for Disney's animated film The Rescuers Down Under, the potential for a partnership between the two companies seemed to fizzle out. When looking at the box office for The Rescuers Down Under, it's not surprising to see why McDonald's bailed, as the film's budget was $37 million, and the film only grossed $47 million. For comparison, The Little Mermaid had nearly the same budget, though grossed $235 million. McDonald's, in the moment, didn't see a need for further cross-promotion if Disney's films were going to continue to bomb at the box office. However, as aforementioned, this 90s Renaissance era of Disney animated films were overall not flops, with movies like The Lion King making nearly $1 billion for the studio. McDonald's loss was Burger King and Pizza Hut's gain, as they were the ones to cross-promote with Disney for some of the most financially successful films of the decade. In late 1996, McDonald's made moves to correct their mistake, and a long-term exclusive agreement was reached between the companies. Michael Eisner unironically said, "This is the most ambitious promotional effort ever developed between two of the best-known family-friendly brands. A true McDisney production." Alright, Michael. This cross-promotion would bring about iconic toys and games, and even the infamous Szechuan sauce.
In 1998, they had this promotion for the Disney film Mulan, where they created a new sauce for the McNuggets called Szechuan sauce, and it's delicious. And then they got rid of it, and now it's gone. This is the only place we're gonna be able to try it, is in my memory.
However, most notable to the subject matter of this video was that McDonald's would be the sponsor of Dinoland at Disney's Animal Kingdom. McDonald's could have entered into the park sooner to promote Splash Mountain, but that didn't happen. McDonald's also could have entered into an official partnership with Disney sooner, but because of the financial failure of The Rescuers Down Under, that didn't happen either. Knowing a box office bomb is what scared away McDonald's before, Disney would need to make consistently successful films for this exclusive agreement to work out. Since McDonald's would enter the theme parks by sponsoring the land promoting Disney's Dinosaur, it put extra heavy weight on the film's success. To recap, if Dinosaur flopped, it would not only cause Disney to lose the CG animation race with Pixar, but also the renewal of their partnership with McDonald's. So, Animal Kingdom's Dinoland needed to be successful in promoting the film, not only for these aforementioned reasons, but also to justify its own existence as the land of synergy between Imagineering and animation. The only question left now is, did that happen? And I think you already know the unfortunate answer. On April 22nd, 1998, Disney's Animal Kingdom was open to the public. While the park wasn't a complete failure, it definitely wasn't an initial success. Dinoland USA featured only one attraction, Countdown to Extinction, sponsored by McDonald's. This was the previously mentioned ride that would take us back in time to see dinosaurs. However, Countdown to Extinction, sponsored by McDonald's, was essentially only connected to the movie Dinosaur by having species of dinosaur present in the ride that would be present in the movie. No plot lines, character names, or overall tone was shared between the two. The ride was intense, dark, terrifying, and scary. If anything, Countdown to Extinction, sponsored by McDonald's, was more of a reflection of Verhoeven and Tippett's original idea for the project, rather than how the project was actually coming along under the direction of Leighton and Zondag. This isn't surprising considering the ride opened 2 years before the film would be released, and all Imagineers likely would have had to work with at the time was the original idea for the film. You also might be wondering why I keep on calling the ride by the long and tedious name of Countdown to Extinction, sponsored by McDonald's. Besides it being funny to say the entire name, it's more so to drive home the point that the land wasn't really promoting the dinosaur movie. It was promoting McDonald's. Everywhere guests turned, Dinoland was covered in golden arches. Any and all aspects were either being presented by, generously funded by a grant from, or made possible by McDonald's. The land's restaurant, aptly named Restaurantosaurus, also served McDonald's menu items. It's also likely that Dinoland featured the first of many French fry stands to come to the Disney theme parks in the form of Petri fries. Though I can't guarantee this, as there is a chance that the Westward Ho fry wagon in Frontierland slightly beat it out. But I digress. Dinoland failed to do the very thing that Michael Eisner greenlit the land to do: promote the film Dinosaur. However, the ride was later changed in an attempt to remedy this issue. The ride was renamed from Countdown to Extinction, sponsored by McDonald's, to just Dinosaur, to match with the film's name. It also toned down some of the scarier elements of the ride and saw a statue of the film's main character, Aladar, put outside the attraction's entrance. But that was the entirety of the change. The ride's plot still didn't match with the film, it still was more intense than the movie, and worst of all, these changes were made in late May of 2000, the same month the film would be released. This meant that slightly before and while the film was first in theaters, the ride would be closed, then only after the film had been out for a bit would a ride that vaguely promoted it reopen. In the end, all other means of marketing would be what actually promoted the film, not the land intentionally made to do such. So, how was the film marketed? Similar to the marketing of The Lion King, the teaser trailer for Dinosaur was just the film's opening scene. It was first shown during the theatrical release of Toy Story 2. It was also included on the home video release of Tarzan, and oddly enough, the Gold Classic Collection DVD of the Aristocats. In this opening scene teaser, the dinosaurs don't speak. All it is heard is their grunts and groans, with the focus truly put on the amazingly crafted blend of computer-generated animation and real-life footage. The Secret Lab studio achieved this through the use of the CG animation software Autodesk Maya. The team revolutionized the user interface elements of Maya, allowing artists to completely customize their workflow and make the program highly modular. While by today's standards the animation can be nitpicked, for the time it was astoundingly innovative. It allowed for this opening scene to be grand and serious and really reflect Tippett's original vision for the project. Unfortunately, that would be the downfall of this promotion, as it set false expectations for what Dinosaur would be bringing to the table. With a reported budget of $127.5 million, Dinosaur was the most expensive computer animated film made at that time, and the most expensive film released that year. However, this budget doesn't even include the cost of acquiring DreamQuest images or starting up the Secret Lab digital studio. Dinosaur would need to have Lion King levels of success, making around or over $1 billion to truly mark the film as a box office hit. But with the aforementioned poor marketing, in both Animal Kingdom and in actual teasers for the film, it would take a miracle for Disney to have that level of financial success. And, as if everything wasn't riding on the film's success already, things only got worse. In late 1999, Fantasia 2000 premiered at Carnegie Hall, and was released exclusively in IMAX on January 1st of 2000. This spiritual sequel to 1940's Fantasia was the first box office bomb Disney had had since The Rescuers Down Under. Although The Rescuers Down Under flopped, the following film from Disney was Beauty and the Beast, which easily reset Disney's reputation. Were Beauty and the Beast to fail, it would have signaled that Disney animation was surely going downhill. However, with the film grossing $440 million and receiving 6 Oscar nominations and 2 wins, it marked The Rescuers Down Under as just a silly little fluke, and Disney still is the kings of animation. Now, Fantasia 2000 put Dinosaur in a similar situation. If Dinosaur wasn't a success, it would mean that Fantasia 2000 wasn't just a silly little fluke. It would mark the end of Disney's reign over all animation. They wouldn't just lose the 3D race with Pixar, they'd be losing the animation race to everyone. On May 19th, 2000, Dinosaur finally released to the public. During its opening weekend, Dinosaur grossed only $38.8 million. While it held the number 1 spot for a moment, it was quickly surpassed by Mission Impossible 2 the following weekend. The film was unable to break even during its theatrical release. The teaser for the film set false expectations, as the serious tone of the film's introduction quickly disappeared just 7 minutes into the runtime. The animals started to talk, make poor attempts at humor, and have awkwardly forced love interests. As mentioned at the very beginning of this video, the common critic consensus was that the only good aspect of Dinosaur was its realistic visuals. But, with these cheap attempts to recreate the charm of the Disney Renaissance, it took away from the realism completely. Film critic Roger Ebert wrote, "An enormous effort has been spent on making these dinosaurs seem real, and then an even greater effort was spent on undermining the illusion." Dinosaur had flopped, critically and financially. As a result, Disney lost the CG animation race with Pixar, ruined the potential of keeping their partnership with McDonald's, and officially brought an end to their successful Renaissance era. About a year later, in October of 2001, Disney announced that the Secret Lab studio would be shut down. Later, in 2007, when the 10-year contract between McDonald's and Disney ended, McDonald's decided to not renew their partnership. All McDonald's presence in the theme parks, especially Dinoland, was phased out by the end of 2008. But despite this sad news, good things started to come from the environment that Dinosaur's failure created. Out of everything Dinosaur did, the one aspect both audiences and critics alike could agree was successful was the animation. Were it not for the use and revolutionization of Autodesk Maya, the innovative animation wouldn't have been possible. The film industry as a whole quickly realized how powerful of an animation tool Maya was, and the software soon became an industry standard for VFX. It's often said that were it not for Dinosaur's popularization of Maya, it's unlikely that the software would have built itself the reputation that it has. Autodesk Maya has been used to create the visual effects for the Harry Potter series, the Avatar franchise, the Lord of the Rings movies, and so many more visually iconic films from the 21st century. Even Pixar chose to partially adapt the software, as they worked in collaboration with Maya to create Presto, their proprietary in-house 3D animation software. Speaking of Pixar, the animation studio continued to win the 3D animation race as they released critical and financial hit after hit. As for Disney, in all realms of animation, not just 3D, they were releasing flop after flop. Dinosaur's failure made executives freak out and caused mass studio interference on all projects. The studio's next feature after Dinosaur, The Emperor's New Groove, may be a classic in the eyes of many nowadays. However, the film was also another flop, which can be partially attributed to the studio's interference. There's an entire documentary about just how frustrating the changes and transformation of the project was, from its original form of Kingdom of the Sun, what would have likely been another Disney Renaissance-style hit, to what we eventually got, which unfortunately did flop. Disney even saw some of their projects bomb horrifically, with Home on the Range and Treasure Planet making $30 million less than their budget. One of the only films in this era of flops to be financially and critically successful was Lilo and Stitch. So, it should come as no surprise that directors Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois were intentionally hiding the project from executives until it was to a point that it essentially couldn't be changed. But that's a different story for a different time. The main takeaway is that Dinosaur's failure made executives leap into the studios in an attempt to fix all upcoming projects. But all this interference did was ruin the potential that these stories had. Disney began to stretch their executive influence beyond their own studio and over to Pixar. Their 50-50 contract was coming to an end, but Disney hoped to keep the rights to the characters and make sequels without Pixar's involvement. The idea was that since Pixar's characters were successful, making movies with them would make Disney successful. But in being so caught up with fixing the problem, Disney executives didn't realize that they themselves were the one causing the problem in the first place. The Pixar characters weren't successful just as characters. They were successful as characters within stories created by people who were given creative freedom. Disney needed to realize that their partnership with Pixar was only successful because of the freedom Pixar studio had. They also needed to realize that their own failure was because of the lack of freedom they had given their studio due to the failure of Dinosaur. But it wouldn't be until Bob Iger took over as CEO that these realizations were finally made.
But we had gone through a period of time where Disney animation had been faltering, and almost a decade. And we had a very good, we had a lot of success with Pixar in what was basically a joint venture with them that was ending. And Steve Jobs, in a very, very difficult and kind of in-your-face manner, told us publicly, meaning he made an announcement publicly that the Pixar relationship with Disney would end. I felt that I had to address Disney animation, that it needed huge improvement. And I thought the fastest way to accomplish that, albeit the riskiest and the most expensive, was to buy Pixar. Not only to bring Pixar in as part of the company, but bring the executives in that would created all the success of Pixar and have them turn Disney animation around.
In 2006, Disney purchased Pixar Animation Studios for $7.4 billion. While this made Pixar a subsidiary of Disney and under their control, Bob Iger made certain that the storytellers working at Pixar would be given the creative freedom that had been making their films successful so far. The first film to be released after this merger was Cars, followed by Ratatouille, then WALL-E, with loads more iconic and well-received films afterwards. There's a whole lot more to this merger, but I'd really like to focus on the pivotal moment for Walt Disney Animation Studios that led to this acquisition, which in my opinion is the failure of Dinosaur. If Dinosaur had been a box office hit, gotten great reviews, and been as successful as Toy Story, Disney wouldn't have a need to continue their 50-50 contract with Pixar. Without Disney, there's a chance Pixar could have completely lost its way after the passing of Steve Jobs, who was the CEO before the merger. There's a chance they could have lost their way even sooner, as without funding and promotion from Disney, their films could have begun to bomb at the box office and force the studio into bankruptcy. As for Disney themselves, without the failure of Dinosaur, there would be no incentive for the mass executive interference seen in the early 2000s. The Emperor's New Groove could have been Kingdom of the Sun. Treasure Planet could have actually been a box office hit. And on the other hand, successful films like Lilo and Stitch could have been less successful if its directors didn't feel the need to hide the project away. Really, we have no idea what would have happened if Dinosaur was a success, but we can see what did happen when it was a failure. Dinosaur marked and led to the downfall of Walt Disney Animation Studios. The only way to remedy this, in the eyes of Bob Iger, was by acquiring a studio that was successful and bringing in their creative visionaries to revive Disney's dying studio. This merger was the first of many for Disney with Bob Iger as CEO. Were it not for the success and smoothness of the Pixar acquisition, it's unlikely that future acquisitions such as Marvel, Lucasfilm, and Fox would have been approved by shareholders or accepted by the to-be-acquired company. For example, in 2011, Bob Iger brought up the idea of purchasing Lucasfilm to George Lucas. George said, "I'm not ready to sell, but if I decide to, there isn't anyone else I'd want to sell to but you." Lucas trusted Iger because of how he handled the Pixar merger. In regards to Pixar, George Lucas is quoted as saying, "You did that right. You took care of them. If I get around to it, you're the only call I'll make." And get around to it George did, as just 1 year later, in 2012, Disney acquired Lucasfilm for $4 billion. To say Disney owned Star Wars solely because of the failure of Dinosaur is ridiculous. But remove one word, solely, and it suddenly becomes a far truer statement. Many factors were in play for all acquisitions Disney made. But if Dinosaur didn't flop, it's unlikely Disney would have been in an environment or position where acquiring these companies made sense. And without Star Wars and Marvel as Disney properties, who knows how drastically different those franchises could be today. While Dinosaur did create an environment and pattern for Disney to acquire lots of companies, Disney hasn't merged with every single studio, as that would make them a monopoly and that's illegal. While turning down a potential merger may not seem big, it can have long-lasting impacts. One of the most notable of which being Disney not getting the theme park rights to the Harry Potter franchise. Now you might be thinking, where's he going with this? How does Harry Potter and the theme parks have anything to do with Dinosaur? The Harry Potter theme park stuff is in Universal Studios. How does this involve Disney's Dinosaur in any way? Well, simply put, in every way. The wizarding world of Harry Potter would not exist without Dinosaur. Remember Beastly Kingdom? The land that was cancelled so that Dinosaur the film could be promoted in Dino Land USA? And remember how the Imagineers leading the Beastly Kingdom project were let go? Well, around the same time Animal Kingdom was being constructed, Universal Studios Orlando was also working on an additional park. This second gate, Islands of Adventure, would open a year after Animal Kingdom in 1999. Islands of Adventure featured a land filled with mythical and medieval creatures, the Lost Continent. It featured a unicorn-themed attraction, as well as a dragon-themed ride, where guests are suspended from the track above them, and guests would go through the chambers of an old castle, and it's literally just Beastly Kingdom. While it's never been officially confirmed for obvious reasons, basically everyone believes that the Imagineers fired from Disney found a new home at Universal and took their creative concepts there. Dinoland pushed Beastly Kingdom out of Animal Kingdom and into Islands of Adventure. Keep that thought in mind, we'll quickly come back to it. The Lord of the Rings novel was written in the 1950s, but not made into a live-action film until the 2000s. The main reason for such a delay can be attributed to the lack of visual effects available at the time to properly capture the fantasy and wonder of Middle-earth. But, come the 21st century, and dinosaurs' popularization of Autodesk Maya, works of epic fantasy fiction like Lord of the Rings could finally be properly visually crafted. In this same way, Maya helped bring Harry Potter to the screen, as it was the VFX software used for the majority of the franchise. Were it not for the animation toolkit Autodesk Maya provided, Harry Potter may have remained as just a successful series of books, and not a successful series of movies. The films could have still been made without Autodesk Maya, but it's unlikely they'd be able to draw the audience into the magic of the wizarding world quite as much. Dinosaur's popularization of Maya is what really made it possible for J.K. Rowling's world to be successfully brought to life. And were it not for the popularity of the films, it's unlikely discussion would be had to bring the story to the theme parks. In June of 2003, J.K. Rowling and Warner Bros. Signed a letter of intent with the Disney parks to bring The Boy Who Lived to the most magical place on Earth. However, Disney was in their phase of executive interference, yet again another thing brought about by Dinosaur. As a result of this focus on budget, and the meddling and intrusions of executives, Rowling and Disney could not come to an agreement on what the land should be. In 2005, Rowling moved from Disney to Universal, in hopes the other theme park could better bring her vision to life. Fortunately for Universal, they already had a land themed around magic. It even featured mythical creatures present in Harry Potter, like dragons and unicorns. This land, the Lost Continent, could easily be rethemed to fit the Harry Potter franchise. The original concept art from Universal had Rowling far more impressed, but she still found everything to be wrong in one way or another. Universal executives and Rowling met to further discuss plans, and while it took a while for things to eventually be set in stone, Universal and Rowling started off and remained on good terms. Were it not for the Lost Continent existing and being able to be rethemed, it's unlikely Universal would have been able to get on such good terms with Rowling. And the Lost Continent wouldn't exist were it not for Dinosaur kicking Beastly Kingdom out of Disney's parks. Rowling did later return to Disney in late 2005 to meet with the new head of operations, but not quite yet CEO, Bob Iger. She told Iger about Universal's plans and that Disney would need to step up their game if they wanted Harry Potter in their parks. However, Iger didn't see the theme park rights to the Potter franchise as an important acquisition at the time. Iger deemed Pixar to be far more important of an acquisition, and ultimately severed all ties with Rowling. And of course, the importance of the acquisition of Pixar was all because of Dinosaur. The $7.4 billion spent on Pixar could have gone towards building the Wizarding World, were it not for Dinosaur killing Disney's animation studio and demanding another studio to be purchased in its place. The engaging visuals of the Harry Potter films, the upper hand that Universal had in acquiring the theme park rights to Harry Potter, and Disney's decision to sever ties with J.K. Rowling, all happened because of Dinosaur. Taking Dinosaur out of this equation completely changes how any and all of these events could have played out. Without Dinosaur, would Disney have built Beastly Kingdom? Or would Universal have built The Lost Continent? Would Harry Potter have such magical visuals? And, in that same vein, would the Harry Potter movies be as successful? And of course, would Disney have the money to build the Wizarding World in their parks? We don't know, because Dinosaur did fail, and Harry Potter did end up in the hands of Universal. The Wizarding World of Harry Potter opened at Islands of Adventure on June 18th, 2010, and it forever changed the theme park game. The land that Universal crafted was incredibly immersive, making guests feel as though they truly stepped into the Hogwarts and Hogsmeade they saw in the movies. The attention to detail and realism set a precedent that Disney would have to follow. No more were the days of McDonald's-sponsored lands that vaguely promoted a film. Now was the time for Disney to create immersive lands that could rival Universal. While not the first land Disney built in response, quite notable is Pandora, the world of Avatar. This land, funnily enough, sits on where Beastly Kingdom would have been, bringing us full circle to how this all began. Pandora is quite immersive, but didn't have quite the same franchise charm that Potter did, especially considering Avatar only officially became a franchise last year. Another land built in response to the Wizarding World was Star Wars: Galaxy's Edge. Not only is Star Wars far more iconic than Avatar, it's also arguably more iconic than Harry Potter. This land is also further related to Dinosaur, as the acquisition of Lucasfilm happened because of the success of the acquisition of Pixar, which happened because of Dinosaur. But all of these lands were second and third attempts from Disney at rebutting Universal. Their first attempt was 2 summers after the Wizarding World of Harry Potter opened, in June of 2012. And that brings us all the way back to here.
Well, if you ever plan to motor west,
Cars Land, in Disney's California Adventure, is the epitome and culmination of the effects that Dinosaur had on the Walt Disney Corporation. The land is based on Pixar's Cars, the first movie the studio released after the $7 billion merger, a merger that wouldn't have happened without Dinosaur. Pixar's Cars was animated using Presto, the in-house animation software made in collaboration with Autodesk Maya. The use of Maya by Pixar wouldn't have happened without Dinosaur. Cars Land rivals Universal by being highly themed and reflective of the source material, making guests truly feel as though they've entered Radiator Springs. And Cars Land wouldn't require such immersion were it not for the Wizarding World, a land that wouldn't have happened without Dinosaur. Also, while Dinoland wasn't a great fit for the sponsorship of McDonald's, this land themed around 1950s Americana would be the perfect home for the Golden Arches. McDonald's could easily have been the sponsor and serve food within Flo's V8 Cafe. Alas, McDonald's had ended their partnership with Disney, a decision that wouldn't have happened without Dinosaur. And looming in the background are rides and attractions themed to Marvel, another studio acquisition that wouldn't have happened without Dinosaur. Nothing about what you see here could exist in the way that it does without Dinosaur. It could potentially exist in some other form or fashion, as other factors did influence the construction of this land. But to exist in this way, how you see it here, just simply is not possible without Dinosaur. To all those who've said that Dinosaur didn't profoundly change the film and theme park industry, respectfully, I disagree. Dinosaur was a flop, but that doesn't mean it came and went with no effect. While failure is often considered a bad thing, it's what drives all of humanity. Success is important, but we cannot reach it and appreciate it without failing along the way. After such a successful decade of animation for Disney, it's unsurprising that they would eventually fail. So while Dinosaur may have been a financial and critical failure, it's that very failure that fueled the change the Disney Corporation would go through in the beginning of the 21st century. Disney will continue to have failures in the future, which will also bring about new opportunities for the company to grow. Disney has, does, and will flop at the box office, but how they choose to react to that flop is what really counts. So, here's to the next failure, and the immense impact it will undoubtedly bring.